Hey guys, just got back from a little trip and I thought we'd take a look at what I picked up. I'd posted a photo of this set online a while ago and posed the question, what is it? Well, I showed the back side because from the front side there's no indication other than, well, it's a TV, because somebody did a horrendous job refinishing it and there was no longer a nameplate on it or any indication of a brand or a model. But I'll tell you what it is. It is a Meck TV, which is an unusual brand, which is what attracted me to it. I was actually contacted by our local antique radio club. Somebody had donated this, and since there was no swap meet this year, there's been no opportunity for them to sell donated items and raise funds for the club and whatnot, so I was happy to spend a little bit of money and come home with both this TV and a box of goodies. So there was a tag on it that said Meck XB-702, which is what the Sam's shows, and a set that looks somewhat similar to this but has a different faceplate on it. Well, I did some digging and discovered that I'm pretty sure this is a model XB-702, in fact. But there are no good photos of it. The only image I've seen anywhere is a bad, low-quality scan of Ryder's service info where they show 3 models with the same chassis, and this is one of them. Now, the only real issue I've seen with this set, and that's kind of a big one, is the horrendous refinishing job someone did. Pretty sure they took a power sander and just sanded the crap out of it and burned right through the veneer in a number of spots with a noticeable dip. Don't do that. That's why I don't use power tools when I work on vintage cabinets. Whether it be a Bakelite or wood, I don't like using power tools because it's too easy to slip or apply too much pressure. And, well, that's that. Now, on a positive side, this is a plain and basic a cabinet as you can possibly get. It's just mahogany veneer on a plywood box. And there's no figure grain or anything like that. It's just a sheet of, I guess it's cross-cut veneer. Same on all sides. This side's the worst. Probably have to end up replacing that. The front, probably touch that up. Top, possibly replace at least half of it. And this side, maybe touch up. So as far as touching up goes, I've seen it done. I haven't done it myself. It doesn't look like a whole lot of fun, but the idea is to take some paint, wood filler, what have you, to fill in the void and then make it look like the veneer does. You can also try patching veneer in, which is difficult, to put it mildly. Oh, hey, Joopy. You gonna help out? But we'll save that for another day. So in addition to the Meck name, which should be down here as near as I can make out, there are no labels for any of the controls. However, there's a note inside that details them a bit. Here's the channel plate, quite off-center. That's nailed to the cabinet, though, so I think the whole chassis is probably shifted over inside. So it's certainly not centered very well, is it? So what's interesting about this set? Who cares? I got a bunch of electrostatic TVs. Well, Meck is a not very common brand. And of the few models they made, this is one of the rarer ones, so that's why I got it. It's also a kind of a funky design inside. Here's a look at the back side. The only thing that drew me to this set is it looks really clean. No corrosion. There is a bit of a label, hard to see. We'll get in there in a moment and take a closer look at that. The design is somewhat similar to Hallicrafters. Their push-button set, the 505, the 506. I restored one of those a few years back. I'll show you the schematic and show you what I mean about it being a strange design, and that has to do with the way the power supply was done. I should also point out that Meck is not known for making high-end stuff. So we're going to see, as cheap and crude as a lot of these 7-inch sets are, this will probably be the crudest one I've shown to date. So for example, the power cord, there's no safety interlock or anything. The wires just go straight in. Back is missing, that's unfortunate. But all the knobs are there. That's another big plus. Let's see, there's a scrap of paper in here. Well, I'll pull all that out later. Let me get some better. Well, here we go. Here's some overhead lighting. I can just grab and move around. Alright, so here's a look at the label. Now, what's curious is where the model should be, it's razor bladed off. Or it should say XA dash and then it's gone. I did come across a conversation thread on the Antique Radio Forum where somebody talked about this this model being for sale on eBay. However, nobody, including myself, seems to have saved the photos from that eBay listing, and it's no longer up anymore. But they also mentioned about the label having some razor blade, some parts cut out of it, seemingly with a razor blade. So it's possible this is the same set they were talking about. I don't know. I'll post online and see if I can spark some memories. That post was from about a year ago, and the item is no longer in existence on eBay, so we can't get the photos from there. So I don't know if that's something they did to their sets commonly, or maybe they just had one set of labels made, and if it wasn't for that exact model, they trimmed it out, and they were supposed to pencil it in by hand, the correct model number. I don't know. But I'll find out what I can find out. So at least one of the tubes says Meck on it. That's that 25Z6 there in the middle. 7-inch electrostatic CRT, that's what all the electrostatic sets use, except for the few 8-inch ones out there. Well, very simple, crude mounting. Speaker up front, looks like the wires have been cut. Maybe at some point to service it. Otherwise, it looks like everything is mounted on the chassis and it just slides out. It's secured below. I don't know if this has been worked on. The gentleman I got it from didn't know anything about that. You can see the original caps are here. I don't think I've ever seen electrolytic caps with tan covers. They're usually black. They're sometimes silver. Anyways, that's about all we can see from here. I'll get the chassis out in a moment, but first let's take a look at a slip of paper that was tucked inside the set and what's in that box that came along with this set. Alright, so here is some history that goes with the set. This is an indication of what the controls are on the front. Judging by the age of this, it could very well be whoever refinished this wrote those down as a reminder. And then there's some more recent notes. Let me see, it was 1082 Archie by Jim Schmier. And he got it from Craig Monroe around 2000, who said it was his father-in-law's old TV. So, don't often get much of any info about the ownership of TVs, but at least we got something in this case. Alright, so, the box. The gentleman I got this from thought that I might find some use with this stuff. I don't know if this originally came with the TV when he got it or not, but it's definitely TV-related stuff. So, a nice vintage pair of rabbit ears. Good old brightener. Don't typically use brighteners, but these are nice to have to salvage CRT sockets from in case you need one. And I know there are some knobs in here and some tubes. Knobs I'm most interested in because they can be pretty hard to come by. Looks like some pretty typical type tubes here. 5U4 rectifier, 6 BQ6 horizontal output tube, horizontal output tube, 6W4 damper tube, I do believe, high voltage rectifier. So these are definitely TV related tubes. So assuming they're good, I'm sure I'll find some use for those. Now let's delve into these knobs. Okay, here's the knobs. One bag contained this, which look to be darn near identical to the knobs that are currently on this set. Just much poorer condition. This comes about from the type of plastic they use that over time deteriorates, just like the stuff they use in Predict is. The only real difference is that there are no concentric circles. And these are molded into the plastic and then painted, so even though these are filthy, there will be some trace of that, and they do not. Otherwise, I think they're... No, they're slightly different. So these are for knurled shafts, and these are for half moon. Otherwise... strange. Okay, moving on. These I don't know. I suspect they're from a radio, but I could very well be wrong about that. This is Stromberg Carlson channel clunker, that much I know. These are Philco knobs. I think this is from a Predicta, the 17-inch metal chassis type. Motorola knob, but this no idea. This not sure. No, these don't go together, so I don't really know. Oh yeah, and finally this. That's an RCA knob, and it's painted. They did have a blonde version of some of their early sets, so I think that's what this is from. Which was a interesting find. They may have used these on some radios, but there's definitely a few TV models. They don't turn up very often, so a neat thing to have. Maybe someday I'll need it, or I can pass it on to somebody who does. Alright, so let's get the chassis out of this cabinet. Funny, out of all the things that are in rough condition, the feet are actually in excellent original condition. And all what appear to be all the original chassis mounting bolts and washers were there. And the speaker is attached to the chassis. So it just all came out as one entire unit. Nice touch. So here is a good look at that label. It says tube layout XA701, and there's where the model number is cut off. This is not a model XA701. Look at the tube layout. We'll be talking more about that in a moment. Standard 7JP4 picture tube. So why did somebody cut these wires and install longer wires? Don't know. This may even have been done back in the day. Certainly done a while ago. Just couldn't spare the expense of putting in a plug for it. Alright, here is the moment of truth. I am hoping that it has not been restored, because that's what I like to do. And it has not. Fantastic. That looks like it is 100% original. Outstanding. I mean, I was convinced that whoever went to the trouble of working on a cabinet would have done electrical restoration as well, but no. I mean, it doesn't look like any of the parts have ever been replaced. Beautiful. Well, a lot of them should. We can see this electrolytic cap has lost its guts. Some of these wax caps are bulging and melting. Check most all of them. So, I'm sure some of you have seen me work on electrostatic sets before. Some of this stuff is pretty straightforward, especially those Admiral ones I just worked on recently had a similar board to this. And here are those characteristic 4 high voltage caps you see in all these electrostatic sets. And there's often a 5th one somewhere to filter the high voltage. So these couple the sawtooth waveforms to the horizontal and vertical deflection plates in the CRT, and there's usually a fifth high voltage cap to filter the high voltage power supply going to the CRT anode. As for the rest, well, it has an unusual power supply. Is it series strung? Sorta, kinda, maybe. We actually do have a power transformer in here, but it's not very big. We've also got a selenium rectifier. We've also got a 25Z6 rectifier tube up top. And I think there might be another rectifier in addition to that. A 6X5. So we got a 6X5, a 25Z6, and a selenium rectifier. And a whole bunch of electrolytics. So what does all that get us? Oh, and I was mistaken, sorry. The transformer below is actually the filter choke on the power supply. This is another power transformer. Why is there a little dinky power transformer in this set? I will show you in a moment. So briefly, no power transformer basically. This runs off the AC line. Crazy power supply, provides various DC voltages for it. Tubes are sort of series strung for the most part. High voltage is generated inside this box with an RF oscillator and high voltage, sort of like a little Tesla coil inside here. Then electrostatically deflected CRT, just like you'd see in an oscilloscope. Tuner, and this is the sound and video IF. And that's the ratio detector transformer for the FM sound. About as basic a TV as you're going to run across. The tuner, I believe, is a rotary, 12-position rotary switch inside here. Kind of a crude mechanism for fine-tuning. And I presume adjusts a variable capacitor on the local oscillator inside there somewheres. I also notice there's a trimmer cap down here. I don't know if that's original or not. Let's see if it is. That's probably the oscillator tube for the RF high voltage. Although I would have thought the adjustment would be inside the box. Yeah, I think that's what this hole is for. So I'm not quite sure what that is all about. It might be, it looks like it's either the horizontal or vertical sawtooth oscillator. That might be to tweak it a little bit. I'll try to restuff these caps because they look kind of cool. Chicago Condenser Corporation television capacitor. I've never seen these before. And since they're all here and they're all original, why not? These types are really easy to restuff. As are these. These little electrolytics, not so much because they knurl over the edge of the cardboard tube on the ends. So that would be tough. Looks like we got 4 of them to contend with. 5. These guys should be really easy to do. There's 6 of these, geez. So that's hesitation. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 6 of these guys. I don't know. But yeah, worry about that after we get the set working. Even if I clip them out, I can always hang on to them and, you know, do whatever. So why restuff it all? Well, because I can, and because the set is somewhat rare and unusual, and it's all original. And it will only be all original once. Alright, let's take a look at the power supply now. I mean, sorry, the schematic.
I found the schematic for this set in Writers Volume 3. They show several models here on the left-hand side, the XA701, and here's the XB-702, that's mine, and the XC703, which looks like it's a suitcase portable version. Not the greatest quality scan, so it's a little hard to see the details. It looks like there is a logo under the screen, and maybe some labels under the controls. Alright, so schematic. This set's a little odd. In particular, the power supply. The rest of it's fairly conventional, but the power supply, it's a little strange, so let's focus on that first. Zoom in here and bring it up to the middle of the screen. Okay, on the left-hand side, we have our AC plug going into the wall. Right off of that, there's a power switch going to the chassis. So this is a true hot chassis set. If you saw my Motorola 9T1 restoration recently, that is a floating chassis. This is hot. So depending on which way you plug in this unpolarized plug, the chassis could be on the hot side of the AC line. Not the safest thing. Definitely want to use an isolation transformer while you work on a set like this. Alright, now things get weird. So, off of that plug, we have a filament transformer. 6.3 volts. But that is just for the 3 tubes in the tuner. And I looked around at some other 7-inch models, and I believe there's a Teletone model that's actually fairly common that uses the same basic design with a different tuner. And I don't think it has this RF tuner heater filament supply transformer. So I think Meck took that basic chassis, which may have been made by a generic manufacturer like Warwick or something, that a number of brands used. I think National might have used it. Firestone, I think, used it. And I think Meck wanted to stand out a little bit, so they designed their own tuner. It's just speculation. Okay, so what about the rest of the tube filaments? They are wired in 2 series strings. So going up to the top here, we've got one string that has 100, I think it's 180 ohm dropper. And then we got 25Z6 and a few 6AU6s, 6AL5. The other string, 12SN7 and a 50 ohm dropper, and then a bunch of tubes. Then they join up together for the 7JP4 and a 6X5. So the 2 individual strings are 300 milliamps, and these 2 tubes at the bottom need 600 milliamps to work. Okay, that's not too strange. Now let's get to the B plus supply. Okay, we've got a bunch of stuff going on over here. Let's start out with the AC line coming in. We go to 1/2 of a 25Z6, wired up cathode to plate such that the output will be negative. So we get a negative 120 volts by rectifying, halfway rectifier right off the AC line. Then going back up, we've got a selenium rectifier going the opposite way with the output on the cathode, and that gives us plus 120 volts DC. Then back to the other half of the 25Z6 to form a voltage doubler. They don't show the voltage, but that loops around and powers the RF high voltage power supply down below. Then we go over to a 6X5 dual diode with the 2 diodes wired in parallel to form a voltage tripler to get us all the way up to 350 volts. And they have some resistors to drop it down to 300 and 150. So all told, we have minus 120, plus 120, plus 150, plus 300, plus 350 for our power supply. I think one reason they made it a little complicated was to simplify the rest of the circuitry, because the rest of it is pretty simple. So after our tuner, consisting of a 6BH6 RF amp, a 6AG5 mixer, and a 6C4 local oscillator, we go through 3 6AU6s for 3 stages of IF. That's very conventional. 6AL5 dual diode for a detector and probably AGC. Then a 6AU6 video amp. Another 6AU6 for sync separator and DC restorer. That's a little bit unusual feature for a budget set. What does that do briefly? When you go from the video detector to the video amp, they couple it with a capacitor, which only passes AC. So you lose your DC offset, which affects your white and black levels for the video signal. This DC restoration will put that back in. And then there's a little pickoff transformer for the audio carrier, and we go through a 6AU6, 6A05 detector, 6AT6, which has two diodes in it that they use for nothing. They're just using the triode as an audio amplifier. It finally drives a 25L6 that drives the speaker. Down below, we've got two 12SN7s, one horizontal oscillator and amp, and one vertical oscillator and amp. And then we've got a bunch of resistors to divide our high voltage down, to bias various points on the CRT, and high voltage caps to couple the sawtooth into the cathode ray tube. That's all pretty standard stuff. So this will be interesting to work on. Curious to see what I can cook up for the power supply. At the very least, we'll want to replace the selenium. And maybe we'll do something for these dropper resistors. But I think to start out with, we'll just leave everything as is before we start tinkering with it to kind of get a baseline and see how well this thing works.
Now there's one last little item I acquired on this expedition. Gentleman I got this TV from is a collector and restorer himself, and he gave me a little tour of his impressive collection and workshop. And it turns out he had no less than 3 examples of this Westinghouse WRA radio in varying conditions. I examined them, and I was curious to see, one, what the original finish looked like, as mine had been refinished poorly in the past, and I'm in the process of refinishing mine. And 2, mine was missing the second hand when I got it. So I wasn't quite sure. I never got a chance to see one up close and personal, and to see what they really look like. Well, 2 of his had the second hand, and they were the same, so seems likely that those are what the originals were. And much to my surprise, he popped one off and gave it to me. And here it is. That's curious because it doesn't match the other 2, which are flat black and kind of a deco skyscrapery look, whereas this is shiny and looks a little different. Now it does appear to have had some coating on it at some point. It's kind of worn off. But what are the odds that he would have 2 examples that have the identical second hand if it wasn't the correct second hand? It certainly fits. So hey, how about that? How about that? Yes, slowly. I think it is the most drawn out project to date that I have, but one day we'll get back to this. Now, unfortunately, I have some other projects I've got to finish, so I can't dive into the set right now, even though I am anxious to, and I think it'll be a pretty quick project. But for now, I put it back together, and I'll put it off to the side. But I did clip out one of the high voltage caps, and I cleaned the old beeswax off the outside with the help of a heat gun on low. Just wanted to get some idea of what these would look like all cleaned up. It's pretty nifty. I've never seen a capacitor actually labeled as a television capacitor. Also not familiar with this brand, Chicago Condenser Corporation. That's another reason I want to keep them, is I haven't seen this brand before. So, that's a general idea. Heat gun on low, paper towel, wipe off the old beeswax. The wax sealing the end is a little bit higher temperature, so a little bit careful application of a little bit higher temp on the tube, and you can slide the insides out, pop a new cap in, seal off the ends with brown hot glue, and there you go. Reinstall it in the set. So, hope you enjoyed this peek at a not often seen Meck XB-702 7-inch electrostatic black and white TV from, I believe, 1949.